Hello and welcome to this episode of the PD Smash Podcast. And today's episode, we have a good slate of topics. First, we're going to talk about the takeaways I have from the Super Bowl. Next, we're going to talk about the QB controversy in the NFL and what that could mean for the NFL long term. After that, we're going to talk about my NBA predictions for the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. And we have so much more for you in store. So, as I said, let's start with the Super Bowl takeaways. Now, I personally do not like to hate on players, but the one player I absolutely despise is Tom Brady. If you haven't read my article about him and sportsmanship, I suggest you read it. But Tom Brady is not only an unsportsmanlike player, he is also just in general a cheater, or an alleged cheater, I should say. But he's definitely, in my opinion, cheated at some point within his career. With all of that in mind, to me, it still does not change the fact that the PD Smash predictions still believe that Tom Brady is the greatest of all time and will continue to be so for a very long time. I'm sorry that, this bubble could be burst for Mahomes. Mahomes doesn't really have a shot at the greatest of all time title anymore. And we'll get into why more later. But it's just a fact. And Tom Brady's kind of snatched that from anybody and everybody. Tom Brady has more Super Bowl rings than any team does Super Bowl wins. That's insane. A single player has more rings than an entire franchise. If that doesn't make you the GOAT, I don't know what does. You put on top of that with the fact that he's going to have a lot of the passing records by the time he retires, and you get a very ironclad case for the fact that Tom Brady is the GOAT. Then you add on to the fact that Tom Brady plays the most important position in football, and you get a case that is almost you can't dispute it. Period. There's a difference, however, between greatest and most talented or best of all time. Because the most talented of all time probably isn't Tom Brady. But he's still the greatest. Just because you don't have the most talent at something in your job doesn't mean you can't be the best at it. For example, I think a lot of people would say in their primes, Aaron Rodgers is definitely was more talented than Tom Brady. But there is no doubt that Tom Brady is a greater player. So you can't really deny that fact any longer. And to anyone who wants to deny that fact, I'm sorry, it's just false. You can claim it's Lawrence Taylor, you can claim it's Peyton Manning, you can claim whoever, but that does not change the fact that Tom Brady is undisputably the GOAT. Now, kind of switching gears, this didn't really tell me much else about the Tampa Bay roster or what this means for Tampa Bay moving forward. I think they'll be in a similar situation next year, but after that, they're still going to have a lot of a QB hole they're going to need to fill. Because even though Tom Brady could probably play till he's 50, I doubt he plays till he's 50. I see him retiring because he wants to spend time with his kids and things along those lines. Not because he can't stop playing. I could see him retiring if he wins the Super Bowl next year, most definitely. If he doesn't win the Super Bowl next year, I could see him giving it one more year. But after that, I don't see him playing any more than 3 years. 3 years tops, I would say, in total. So 2 more years after this one, I would say, is probably the max Tom Brady will play in the NFL. Now, on the flip side, for the Kansas City Chiefs, this kind of highlighted 2 things. One, how important offensive line play is. Not Lamar Jackson, my apologies. Patrick Mahomes was running for his life the entire time of that game. And at first, he was thrown off a rhythm. And you saw that with the passes he wasn't hitting that he normally hits. But Patrick Mahomes adjusted because he played like that in Texas Tech. However, the line play still did play a factor in the fact that he couldn't hold the ball as long, so it made it harder for him to get the ball downfield and create those chunk plays that the Chiefs are so famous for. Not only that, but the line play also made it very hard to run the ball. Now, you combine that with the fact that Patrick Mahomes had turf toe, which made it harder for him to change direction when scrambling. Because if you watch the game, even though he did a great job of scrambling in many, many situations, he never really changed direction that fast or that hard. It was always loop cuts, or he always did 90-degree turns, but never 180-degree turns or anything more than 90-ish degree because of that turf toe, because it was hard for him to plant that foot. But even with all that said, he still played a brilliant game. Yes, the stats don't show it, but in the third quarter, he made 2 back-to-back throws that were, yes, incomplete, but catchable, extremely catchable for his receivers, that I don't think anyone else ever could make. One of the throws was him literally fading out of bounds, where he just chucked it downfield with it was like a 30-yard laser to the back pylon, and it hit Pringle in the hands. And then the fourth down, where he looped around, was literally falling on his face. And while he was falling on his face, my apologies, with no leverage at all, no throwing mechanics, none, zero, zilch, he threw a 30-yard dart that hit his running back in the face mask. And not only that, he made plays like that throughout almost the entire game. So this loss, isn't really on Patrick Mahomes. It's on everyone else. I think it looked like the Chiefs just came out complacent. And that could have been because of the offensive line play. It could have also been the controversy. I cannot say that word today. My apologies. The situation that surrounded Andy Reid's son with the DUI and the fact that he got into a fatal car crash. Now, that could have also played a factor, because he was also part of the Chiefs' coaching staff. So that must have hit everyone hard. So you combine all those factors, the Chiefs were set up to fail. So, in hindsight, I'm not really surprised the Chiefs failed, but I do expect them to be back at it again next season, and be right there in Super Bowl contention once again. Now, moving on to the next topic that we have to discuss, we're going to talk about just very early predictions. And these are just going to be rapid fire. Okay, what I think is going to happen, and just kind of going through here. Now, MVP, I would say Russell Wilson, but he just never seems to be able to get over the hump. I think Derrick Henry actually is a dark horse to win this, because I think he might be mad that he didn't win MVP, and he might come out and get 2,300 yards. But my favorite right now is going to be Patrick Mahomes or Deshaun Watson. But since Deshaun Watson is not playing with a competent organization at the moment, it has to be Patrick Mahomes. I think Mahomes is going to come out re-energized, re-motivated, and he's not going to coast through the regular season. And I think that's going to give him his second MVP. Next, just kind of want to talk about Defensive Player of the Year. I believe it's Xavier Howard is his name, the quarterback for the Dolphins. I think he's going to have a really good chance at winning it next year, because he's just a ball magnet. And I think next year the Dolphins are going to actually get some recognition, because they were good last year and people started catching on towards the end. But I think this next year they're going to really start to pay attention early. And I think that will impact how many people see his presence on the defensive end and how impactful he truly is. After that, I think Offensive Player of the Year. I think Michael Thomas is going to come back and have a monster year because I do believe that Jameis Winston is going to start. And Jameis Winston, although his decision-making hasn't been great in the past, has the arm talent to make the throws necessary to Michael Thomas. And I think that he will come back with a monster season, and I think he will win his second Offensive Player of the Year in 3 years. After that, it's too early for me to say really any other predictions in terms of awards. However, I do see that I do have a couple predictions in terms of standings. I think as of right now, a team that wasn't in it last year that I think is going to be in it this year in the mix, I think is the Chargers. Because I don't know if the Chargers will necessarily make the playoffs. But I think they will be way more competitive than they were this year in terms of wins. Because you get rid of Anthony Lynn. You bring in someone who can coach in close games. And you get another year of development from Herbert. And I think you get a team that is ready to take that next step and is ready to get 8 or 9 wins. And that can potentially propel them to a wild card berth. I don't really have any other predictions other than the fact that, sadly, I don't think the Washington football team is going to be able to repeat as division champions. I don't see them getting very much better unless they're able to acquire Deshaun Watson. And Dallas is going to get better. The Eagles are going to get better. And the Giants are going to get better. So that's just going to kind of leave the Washington football team just kind of chilling there. And I don't think they'll win the division, which will make me very sad. But it just seems like the fact that it is. Okay, now, the Eastern Conference playoff look. Now, I'm going to go 1 through 8 here. And then give them my 9th and 10th team. So, first off, I believe that the first seed is going to be Milwaukee. I think that Milwaukee, in the end, is the best regular season team in the NBA. I think Budenholzer is a great regular season coach. I think Giannis is the best regular season player. And I think that team is just constructed to win a lot of regular season games. And I think that's just going to be a fact of life. And I see them getting the 1 seed yet again. I don't see Philly overall being able to compete with Milwaukee's consistent dominance. I'll get to Philadelphia later, and I think they're probably better than the Milwaukee Bucks in terms of how much more likely they are to make the playoffs. They just aren't going to be as regular season dominant as the Milwaukee Bucks. Now moving to 2, I think Brooklyn is going to end up coming up and getting that 2nd seed. Because I think in March, they're going to start to click. And I think they're going to go on like a 10-11 game win streak to end out the season. And that's going to propel them to the 2nd seed. Because that team still has good pieces without Kevin Durant, Kyrie, and James Harden. So they can help contribute to regular season wins. And then when they need to turn it on and start turning it on in March, they're going to rack up a bunch of wins. And that's going to translate to the 2nd seed. Kind of like what happened with the Clippers last year. At 3, I had the Philadelphia 76ers because I think that they'll stay on like a relatively consistent pace throughout the year. I just think that consistent pace is going to land them at 3. Next, at the 4 seed, I do think Boston is just going to stay where they are at the 4 seed. I don't think they're going to move. They might fluctuate a little throughout the season, but I think they're going to settle in the 4 seed pretty early in relative terms when you're talking about playoff picture. There's not really much to discuss about them. They have pretty much everything they have had previous seasons. They're getting things to click. They're getting Kemba to play a little better. But I think the 4th seed is just going to be where they stay. Now, for the 5th seed, I think, again, Indiana. They lost Victor Oladipo, but they didn't really have him much of last season. So, the 5th seed is kind of where they were before. I think they were either the 5th or the 4th seed. So, they're just going to chill around that area. I think they're pretty locked into the 5th seed. I don't see them losing the 5th seed, and I don't see them moving up. Because they have a bunch of good players, but not like a great player. Next at 6, I actually see the Miami Heat getting at 6. Because I believe that the Miami Heat are going to be able to get it together. And I think the Miami Heat will end up being able to push the Charlotte Hornets down. However, with that said, I think they could also end up being like the 10th seed because they've been very hit and miss this season. Now, I do think, though, they will make the playoffs one way or another, whether that's through the play-in tournament or through seeding in general. Now, for the 7th seed, I do see Toronto being the 7th seed. Now, I'm very flip-floppy on this because they're inconsistent, but at the same time, they've been turning it on more and more later throughout the season. So, at one moment, I could be extremely confident about the Toronto Raptors making like a push for the 5th seed or the 4th seed. And the next moment, I'm like, are they even going to make the playoffs? So I think the 7th seed is a good tentative place to put them because I do see them making the playoffs, but they could, at one hand, be a 9th seed and the other hand be a 4th seed. So it's really just difficult to gauge where they're at this current moment. After that, to round out, I think the last spot I'm going to give, the 8th seed, is going to be to the Charlotte Hornets. I think the Charlotte Hornets are a better team than a lot of people have given them credit for over the past couple weeks. I think you have Gordon Hayward, who is that guy who you can give the ball to in clutch moments. And then you have a great second option in LaMelo. You have a good supporting cast around them with Malik Monk, with Devontae Graham, with Terry Rozier, with PJ Washington. So I think they will be able to sneak and hold that 8th seed, and I believe they will end up making the playoffs. Now, if you want to hear my Western Conference predictions, you'll have to wait till next week's episode. However, if you want to hear more about my in-depth analysis of each team that is on the fringe of making the playoffs or is just like one way or the other on the fringe, whether they're the 6th seed or the 13th seed, because I'm looking at this now and the 13th seed has 9 wins and the 6th seed has 12 wins, so that's literally 3 wins difference. So to just kind of gauge, I gave like a in-depth analysis or more in-depth analysis of each team in the article I posted this week. So go check that out if you want a more in-depth analysis. The link to my blog is below if you're either listening to this on Spotify, Anchor, or on YouTube. Now, to end off this episode, I want to talk about what this next week is going to mean for the Jazz. Now, yes, have the Jazz been exceptional this past third of the season? Yes, they have been on fire. So much so that I don't even know if you could call it really fire anymore. However, a lot of the teams they've been playing have not been the greatest. This all changes in the next week. In this next week, they play some of the toughest competition there is. First up, on Friday, they play the Milwaukee Bucks. Next, on Saturday, they play the Miami Heat. Then on Monday, they play the Jazz. Then on Wednesday, they play the Clippers. And then on Friday, they play the Clippers again. So, if everything goes according to plan there, and they're able to win 4 out of those games, 4 of those games, then you have to really start considering them as contenders. However, if they drop 3 of these games, they drop 2 of these games even. Actually, if they drop 3 of these games, and them being the first 3, you're going to really have to consider them to not really be contenders anymore. If they drop 2 of these games, and those 2 games are to Milwaukee once and to the Clippers once, then the debate is still live. But if they lose 2 games, and the 2 games are to the Heat and the 76ers, or to the Clippers twice, then you're going to really have to start considering that they are pretenders instead of contenders. So, this really does mean a lot. This next week means a lot, because we could start talking about the Jazz in terms of the top 3 teams in the league, or just the Jazz as we have in years past of, oh, they're good, but they're not great. They're a good regular season team, but they're not good enough. They don't have enough talent to even make it past the first round, let alone make it past the semifinals or the conference finals. It would be a pipe dream to assume they would make the finals. That's where most people are at in their head right now. But if they if they win these next 5 games, or 4 of these next 5 games, then a lot of people's ideas are going to shift, and I think that's going to be really important to the landscape of the NBA moving forward. Thank you all for coming to this episode of the PD Smash podcast. If you want to contact me, there is a link to my blog in the description of this episode. So, if you're on my Spotify or YouTube, click that link and then go to the contacts page in my blog. If you're listening to this on my blog, just go to the contact page on my blog, or scroll all the way down on the home page. And my phone number and email are listed there, and you can contact me that way. Thank you all for staying to the end. And until next time, PD Smash signing off.